Hey guys, before I start with the actual video, I felt the need to include this statement just to cover all of my bases. I'm currently having to record this and re-edit my video quite literally the day before it's scheduled to post because apparently a few days ago, Jasmine Moss herself shared a video of a reviewer disagreeing with Listen to Kristen's review of Bonds of Hercules, and now Kristen is being attacked by Jasmine's fans because she violated that reader-author boundary by reposting a video by a creator who didn't like her book. I don't remember if the reviewer defending her book actually tagged Jasmine. It's kind of confusing. I think I saw someone saying that the reader or that Jasmine was tagged, but then I think Jasmine said that she wasn't even tagged in the video and she was just in the tags herself looking at reviews. Either way, it's not okay. I can't believe that I have to say this in the year of our Lord 2025, but if you're a reader, don't tag authors. Don't send them negative reviews of their books, and unless you're actively looking for a fight with that author, don't go onto their social media and tell them all the things you didn't like about their book. And if you're an author, you shouldn't go looking for reviews and deep dives, period. Especially if you can't handle the idea of a stranger on the internet having negative opinions on your work, but obviously not everyone has the discipline and self-restraint to do that. So if you are going to go out of your way to get your feelings hurt by seeking out negative reviews, don't fucking repost those videos and then weaponize your fans against small creators just because they didn't like your book. Now, Jasmine is a New York Times bestseller, and she has nearly 500,000 ratings on Goodreads just from all of her books combined. Bonds of Hercules was nominated for the Goodreads Romantasy 2025 award. Kristen has less than 11,000 subscribers on YouTube. There's absolutely no excuse for an author with her level of success to be punching down on smaller content creators like that. We just had an entire controversy about authors in reader spaces. I really cannot believe that this has happened so soon after that whole mess. Anyway, I felt the need to put an extra disclaimer before this video starts because, like Kristen's review of these books, this video is very scathing. And just like Kristen, I got pretty mean about this book and the author in my review. I recognize now that many of the things I said were probably uncalled for, but given that I only learned about all of this less than 2 days before the video was set to post, there's not much I can do about it other than say that I recognize how this could get me a lot of flack from fans and possibly the author, given that she's shown she's willing to cross that boundary that separates authors from reviewers. The only thing I can say is that I'm going to try and be mindful in the future, specifically when it comes to saying mean things about the authors of the books I read in the future. I will admit that I do tend to get worked up very easily when talking about these books, and I'm a very opinionated person, which sometimes causes me to make harsh judgments based on actions and behaviors of people that I perceive as being problematic. I fully admit that and take accountability for that. That's a me thing that I have to work on. At the end of the day, everything I say is simply my own opinion. I've seen a few creators have to clarify this specifically, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that as well. Sometimes in my reviews, I speak in a way that sounds as if I'm addressing the author personally. I am not. Nothing I say is said with the intent of directing it to the author. If I do speak in a way that sounds like I'm speaking to an author, it's usually a bit to make my crash outs more entertaining for my viewers because they seem to really enjoy that. If I wanted to say something directly to the author, I would tag them or message them personally, but I don't, and I won't. The only authors that I have any desire to engage with are the authors who specifically reach out to me on the grounds of wanting to connect and maybe do a little promotion of their book. That's it. I will never go out of my way to approach authors or to tell them my opinions on their work, be it positive or negative. As I and many other creators always say, reviews are for readers. Authors have no business inserting themselves in those spaces, and I always give fans and potential authors stumbling on my videos warning that I don't have anything nice to say about a book and recommend that they don't engage with my video. If you do still choose to engage with my content knowing that you're not going to like what I have to say about it, that's on you. And also, just because Kristen is going through it right now with butthurt fans, maybe go and give her videos a watch. I actually found them very entertaining, and I had a lot of the same thoughts that she had on the book. I'll link her videos down in the description. I think she's great, and her analysis on these books is very good. Anyway, just wanted to get all of that out of the way. You know, I don't want to get into a huge conversation about, like, this entire mess. I just wanted to lay all that out there, and now I'll actually let you guys get back to the video. Enjoy. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Connor, back with another rant review where I read terrible books that have become insanely popular and slowly lose my mind in real time for your viewing pleasure. But before we get into that, I just wanted to take a little moment to talk about how recently an indie author reached out to me about sending me a copy of their new book. And I believe I got a comment on one of my Age of Scorpius videos about wanting to have me as a beta reader for their own book. I don't know how serious that particular author was, but I actually really loved the idea of getting more involved in the book community and having the opportunity to read books by up-and-coming indie authors, so I made an email specifically for this channel. If anyone wants to get in touch with me regarding your book, you can shoot me an email at queerreaderconnor@gmail.com. For some reason, the queer reader was already taken, so I just had to make do with what was available. I will link it in the description below, but you can also just find it on my page. And I just wanted to thank those who have expressed an interest in reaching out to me. Whether you do or don't, that's perfectly fine. I'm super flattered that people watch my videos and think, yeah, I want this guy to read my book. When I made this channel, I didn't really expect to get a whole lot of attention and was just mainly doing it for fun. So it does mean a lot to me that people are like actually interested in what I have to say about books. And I think it would just be super cool if I could have the chance to network with other independent authors and sort of foster a community where their books are able to get to a wider audience, especially more queer books. So yeah, I would love to hear from some of you about your books that you're writing, so by all means, feel free to get in contact with me if you are interested. I promise that I'm not as mean as I seem in my videos. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, on today's roster we have Blood of Hercules by Jasmine Moss. This book made me wish I was illiterate. I have never read a book that made me despise the act of reading more than Blood of Hercules did. Some of you may be thinking, oh, come on now, Connor, it couldn't possibly be that bad. Well, I regret to inform you that it really was. I know that I've treated every bad book before this one as like the worst book I've ever read, but as of right now, this one makes all of the others look like literary masterpieces. Okay then, what is so bad about this book, you might say? I'm gonna get there. But before I do, I just want to give the disclaimer that reviews are for readers. If this is a book that you do enjoy and can't handle negative criticisms towards, you're gonna want to close this video right now. You're entitled to your questionable tastes, and I'm entitled to my belief that this story is worse than the entirety of Wattpad. If you're the author or family and friends of the author, I guarantee that you don't want to be around to hear what I have to say because none of it is nice. Anyway, jumping right into the summary. I'm just a girl, and it turns out I'm Hercules. I'm struggling to survive in a Titan-infested world where Spartans, immortals from the 12 royal families who have godlike powers and obscene wealth, rule over all. A shy, stammering foster child with nothing. I keep my head down, cover my scars, and focus on excelling in school. At least I try to. Then it happens. My blood test reveals that I'm part of the powerful elite. I'm one of them, a Spartan. Forced to attend the Spartan War Academy, I undergo the most harrowing why can't I say this word? I undergo the most harrowing test of all time to see if I have what it takes to be an immortal. There's just a few problems. Achilles and Patro are my scary mentors. Charon, the ferryman of death, and Augustus, the son of war, are my terrifying professors. Also, I'm pretty sure either someone's stalking me everywhere I go or my sanity's slipping. I have a bad feeling both are true. I'm surrounded by villains and they're smothering me with their hate, obsession, and dark possessiveness. Too bad for them, they have no clue just who they're messing with. Dark romantasy for readers who love Who Did This to You? Extreme enemies to lovers. Strong heroine, that's a lie. Morally gray alpha heroes. Zodiac Academy, Quicksilver, and When the Moon Hatched. Those are all vastly different books from my understanding. I can see how this might be like the Zodiac Academy and maybe Quicksilver, but I have no idea how this book was at all like When the Moon Hatched, but I really only know that book from a Rent review that I watched, so I could be entirely wrong. There is a content warnings page. This says, "This is a story of dark romance and darker obsession. Please note that it contains themes that may be triggering for some readers. There is violence, depictions of murder," I would argue that falls under violence, "stalking, suicidal thoughts, bullying, explicit language, and betrayal." I don't think betrayal is a trigger. I could be wrong. I don't think there's necessarily anything triggering about betrayal. What Jasmine did fail to mention in her content warnings was manipulation, sexual harassment /SA, and violence towards sex workers. And you'll understand what I mean later in the video. All right, without further ado, let's just rip that band-aid right off. So they're not listed in the actual chapter numbers, but there's two kind of like prologue-esque chapters that, you know, are just kind of like little setups for the actual chapters of the story. So I'll just call this like prologue 1 and prologue 2. Some seer has a vision and goes to Zeus to have a marriage law passed so that the legal age is 26 instead of 100. And Charon and Augustus need to be professors in the Crucible this year. I don't think that one was really all that necessary. I feel like that was stuff that could have been explained in later chapters as the story was progressing, but whatever. The next one is kind of like a little history lesson. So the Greek gods aren't Greek gods. They are called Spartans in this book. They live forever, but rarely are able to reproduce among themselves. After humans showed up, they coexisted for a while before learning they could kill their gods by cutting them into tiny pieces or starving them into a coma. Gods disappeared and destroyed all knowledge they shared with humans. This is apparently what led to the burning of the Library of Alexandria and the fall of the Roman Empire. The gods then separated into two houses. Olympians, who are the good gods that don't hurt people and their powers are focused on advancement and bettering themselves. They reproduce with humans to keep their numbers strong. And then there's the evil, nasty chthonic houses that only have magic that can hurt, and they're racist, so they don't mix their blood with weak, lowly humans. What I found very weird was the only, canonical chthonic god among the houses is Hades. The other three are Ares, Aphrodite, and Artemis, even though those three are all part of the Olympian gods. So already the author is just going off the rails, because the chthonic gods were gods directly associated with the underworld, such as Hades, Persephone, Nyx, Thanatos, etc., etc. The chthonics tried to rise up against the Olympians, and the war lasted until there were only the heads of the chthonic houses and 8 Olympian houses left before they signed a ceasefire. Then Titans appeared, and the Spartans reintroduced themselves to humanity as saviors, and the chthonics were the ones forced to fight the Titans as punishment for what they did in the war. They're also made to fight each other in these brutal and bloody gladiatorial tournaments. Despite this, it says that the chthonics have been growing their numbers while the Olympians have been birthing less and less powerful children. How is this possible when the chthonics are dying in battle left and right? This isn't explained. Now, they're apparently gearing up for a second war against the Olympians, and this is kind of where the story starts. Supposedly, the author is a former lawyer with a degree in Greco-Roman classical studies, yet her writing is giving high school fan fiction. The Titans had arrived in the year 2050, and the world had crumbled. Kids at school called it apocalyptic core. I called it hell. Their existence was unfortunate if you wanted to live, parentheses, I didn't. The main character, Alexis, meets an echidna named Nyx. Nyx, in this book, is not the goddess and personification of night, but from a race of invisible snakes, even though echidna in Greek mythology was a half-woman, half-snake, and not a talking full snake like Nyx is in the book. Alexis befriends Nyx immediately, because she's an abused little 10-year-old who doesn't fear death. Alexis lives in a crappy trailer with her drug-addict foster parents that beat and neglect her, and the very next morning, some old lady lady comes by and tells the foster parents they're being assigned to a new kid. Charlie is a 9-year-old yellow-eyed kid who is now Alexis's new friend and little brother. His weird eyes are literally never addressed in this story. He is clearly not a normal human, but we never find out what his deal is. And I really thought that that was going to be something we would get into in this story, but we don't. One night, Alexis hears her foster parents talking about getting rid of Charlie because the winter is harsh and they're low on food, and no one would know or care if he disappeared. So she tells him to hide in the bathroom, and if things get bad, to call the first responders hotline. It then mentions something about there being only 10 chthonic Spartans in existence, and only 5 are able to fight the Titans. And I was wondering about that because the prologue says that the chthonics were expanding numbers and becoming more powerful. How are there only 10 in the world and only half of them are able to fight, but that's still somehow enough to lead to a second war? Alexis gets into a fight with her foster parents, and they nearly kill her. Nick saves her, and they both retreat to the bathroom with Charlie, and then a Titan suddenly shows up and kills the mom, but not the dad for some reason. This whole scene was not only chaotic in the story, but also the writing felt very all over the place. It feels like it's written by an edgy teenager with a C average in creative writing. The paramedics and police show up, briefly treat Alexis, but she's permanently deaf and blind on the left side, and now her iris is completely white. That's not how that works, I'm pretty sure. She tells the police that her foster dad was the one who killed the mom, and they arrest him and then just leave these 2 children by themselves without a home because their trailer then gets towed since it's considered crime scene evidence. And I find it incredible that the justice system in this world cares about crime scene repossession, but child services seems to be completely non-existent. I love how the author supposedly knows a lot about both the legal system as well as Greek mythology, and then decided to write a book where she applies none of that knowledge, and instead has just decided that she's going to write a post-apocalyptic-esque setting where there is no actual system in place, and also the only thing that is true to Greek mythos is the characters' names and literally nothing else. I, myself, have never been a huge Greek buff, but my mother and my best friend back home in Florida are way into it, so I have picked up a lot of things by just being around them, and so far, from what I know, there is not a single thing in this book that is actually true to original lore. Why are the gods called Spartans when there was a real place called Sparta, and the actual Spartans were just regular humans? Did the OG Sparta just never exist in this world, or is there the regular human Spartans and then the immortal god Spartans? One of the chthonic Spartans is said to be the child of Artemis and some other guy, except Artemis was a virgin goddess as well as one of the Olympian gods. Why go so off script when you have a plethora of actual chthonic gods to choose from, like Nyx, or Hecate, or Thanatos, or Hypnos? The list is almost endless. Why are we allocating gods who are not chthonic into chthonic houses? I feel like it's really just because the author doesn't care about keeping true to existing lore and is just recycling the more well-known names for the sake of audiences who only know the barest bit of surface level Greek knowledge. Everything Greek related just feels like buzzwords to draw you in, when nothing in this book feels even remotely related to Greek mythology. Alexis is 19 and a math prodigy, because of course she is, and she's going to solve a really hard equation and get into a Spartan college because she's not like other teenagers in high school. We learn that Spartans are broadcasted over the internet as sort of entertainment when they fight each other and Titans, and they're basically like celebrities, and they even get their own fan fiction. The website also had some deeper and more thought-provoking content on the Spartans, sketches of their naked penises submitted by humans after first-hand accounts. Not that I'd looked. Okay, I'd looked once, but I'd screamed and powered down the public library computer. Fine, I'd restarted it so I could look again. Maybe I'd had a lengthy debate with the librarian over whether penises looked like misshapen snails. Parentheses. She was team sea cucumbers. Sure, I'd then spent 5 days in a row checking the page because I couldn't believe men really had such things between their legs. Yes, this all happened last week. No, I don't want to talk about it. I'm still mourning my innocence. This This feels like it was written by a middle schooler. The author also does that thing where the main character is so much better than everyone around her because she's intelligent and everyone else is either stupid or vapid. Was I the only person in the world these days who respected math? Shut up, no one cares. You actually deserve to be bullied. Get off your mathematical high horse. Genuinely, I find intellectuals to be the most insufferable people on the planet. We see a video of the two most popular Spartans, Achilles and Patroclus, but for some reason he is exclusively called Patro. I have no idea why, because so far literally no one else has nicknames. Achilles isn't called Achilles, and frankly Patro just sounds fucking stupid. But that's honestly fitting because we're only 10% into this book, and so far every page I've read has been mind-numbingly idiotic. Please listen to this description of Patroclus. Short, wavy black hair, full crimson lips, long dark eyelashes, black skin, hollowed cheeks, and deep dimples created a stunning picture. Now, I want you all to think about images of people with black skin and thick red lips. Jasmine, how did this not occur to you? The rumors are true. He really does look like the statue of David, someone said, and the class made noises of agreement. Are we thinking of the same statue of David? Also, apparently Alexis finished high school 3 years ago at the age of 16. You know, because she's such a genius. But she's still there because you can only take the Spartan exam at 19. So she's just, what, been coming back to school for 3 years? How is that allowed? It says she mostly spends her days in the school library. Jasmine Moss knows that actual libraries exist and are free, right? Why is she still allowed on campus if she's already graduated? Why was she just sitting in a homeroom classroom if she's not enrolled there anymore on account of having finished 3 years ago? Why does this book not make any sense? I love when authors do this thing to make their characters seem cooler and more interesting, but it just kind of makes everything sound more ridiculous. We know that Alexis is super intelligent because she solves hard math equations and she tutored other students for food vouchers. Why did you need to add in that last part about graduating early but still have her being in school anyway? The author also doesn't know how nuclear weapons works. When they'd first emerged in 2050, governments had tried dropping nuclear bombs on them. It had been a disaster. There was an infamous image of a lone Titan emerging from the blast, disfigured but still moving, eyes locked on the injured humans caused in the blast zone. See, the thing about nuclear bombs is that they destroy entire cities. There wouldn't be any injured humans for Titans to lock eyes with because you'd need to be anywhere between 5 to 20 miles to avoid being absolutely obliterated. I feel like this is pretty basic knowledge. Literally everyone in the US is taught about Hiroshima and how the bombs affected it. It feels like Jasmine just likes to pull shit out of her ass without putting in the bare minimum of research. Like, you can really tell that she just puts whatever she thinks sounds cool without considering how ridiculous it actually is. Case in point, we're introduced to the librarian who carries a gun and apparently shot a student in the dick when she caught him getting a handjob under one of the desks. One, that's ridiculous. How would the school not be sued by the parents? Why is it okay for staff to just be maiming students that they don't like? Why are adults allowed to shoot minors? How does the legal system in this world even work? Also, Alexis likes the librarian because of this, but at every other point in the book has been absolutely appalled by violence, and is also super against killing because she's constantly stopping Nyx from killing anyone that bullies her. But for some reason, she idolizes the librarian for having shot a teenager? Okay. Alexis is taking the Spartan exam, and this test takes 12 hours to complete. I have never heard of a 12-hour nonstop test, and these are all 19-year-olds. Who is sanctioning this? Were they allowed to have lunch and dinner breaks? I get that this is a fictional setting, but the author doesn't try to make a single thing realistic, like, in any way. This whole book is absolutely ridiculous. Also, aside from math, the main character is obsessed with classical music, you know, because she's not like other girls. She's intellectually superior, so of course she always has some kind of symphony playing in her head. Alexis finishes the test, and at the end, everyone has to prick their fingers and fill bubbles on the page with their blood. Why is this something they have to do? No clue. It's not explained. When Alexis does this, her test fizzles and disintegrates, and the proctor initiates some kind of protocol where half-human Spartans from the House of Zeus bust into the room Kool-Aid Man style to inject something in her blood. Per the Spartan Federation's merit test law, we're giving you enough purified adrenaline to kill a Cyclops. If you're actually an abandoned Spartan mutt, which is extremely rare, then you'll survive. He sounded doubtful as he held up a timer. But if you're a human who illegally obtained Spartan blood on the black market and are lying to me, then you'll be dead in 3 minutes. What is happening? This book is so bizarre. If they have blood tests to find whether someone is human or Spartan, why don't they just make it mandatory, like in schools or just in general, to have every person test, like have every person's blood tested to determine whether or not they're an abandoned mutt? Like, why is this only a thing that's being done when they take a test at 19? During this time, the Spartan goes on this huge monologue about how she couldn't possibly be an actual Spartan mutt because there hasn't been a female mutt in centuries, and there's no way she could be an heiress because they're pure and clean, unlike her, and their numbers are so low that no one in their right mind would abandon a female child. So obviously this is the author's way of telling us that this is exactly what Alexis is in literally the most lazy and uncreative way of dropping important story details since the parapet scene from Fourth Wing. Guess what? You're not even the first one to do this. Last year we had 18 fraudulent positives, all simpering girls. Do you think we like to waste resources leaping across the globe, only for you to be fangirls who we have to fucking murder? Kronos, it's embarrassing the state of humanity has fallen to. Fun fact, because you're about to be 6 feet deep, mutts used to microdose on this stuff to compete with heirs, but that stopped because every single one of them went insane. This book has a 3.95 on Goodreads. How? God, this writing is awful. So obviously Alexis doesn't die, and she then gets transported to this Spartan academy and is immediately thrown into an initiation massacre. Right after the book does this whole explanation about the Spartans having low reproduction rates and desperately trying to reproduce with humans to keep their numbers up, just to have them all kill each other. Welcome, initiates, to the Spartan War Academy's Initiation Massacre. If you survive, you'll have the honor of participating in the Crucible, the most rigorous test of intellect in the entire world. This initiation massacre... I'm struggling. This initiation massacre is a sacred privilege. Also, didn't we just learn that there are even less female Spartans born than male? Wouldn't that make her more valuable and they would want to keep her alive? Apparently, Spartans don't actually achieve immortality until 20 or 20. I think it says 21 in the beginning, but then later in the book, it's 20. So I think that's another inconsistency within this story because Jasmine Moss doesn't know how to keep her shit straight. So yeah, Alexis is just thrown into this death match, and even though women are extremely rare among Spartans, all these dudes are jumping her and assuming she's an abomination since she was abandoned. Bold of you to assume when she's the first female Spartan to be born in hundreds of years. Maybe that's something that should be investigated. But nothing in this book makes sense, and it's just violence for the sake of violence. Only 10 Spartans are allowed to make it through the Crucible, and I find it really funny how the Spartans are supposedly so desperate to increase their numbers due to fertility issues, but then intentionally make all their kids fight to the death until only a small number survive. You guys started off with 20 kids and then made them cut their numbers in half. I don't think y'all are in a position to do that when the world is literally being destroyed by titans. There is zero rhyme or reason as to why the author chose to do this, other than the fact that the author thinks she's edgy and doesn't understand that you need to include realistic reasons as to why things in your book are the way that that they are. There isn't actually any plot-related reason as to why they do this. It's just for the sake of violence porn, because the author thinks that will distract readers from the fact that her writing is dog shit. The only reason Alexis survives this massacre is because Nyx bites anyone who attacks her and they die instantly. The fight scenes in this chapter were just really terribly written. In fact, scratch that. The entire chapter, no, the entire book, just the whole book. This whole book was horribly written. Man grabs slash kicks slash punches Alexis, Nyx bites him, he dies, Alexis runs away, rinse and repeat. Honestly, the way this author writes violence scenes is really chaotic and all over the place. Reading these scenes feels like what it's like inside my unmedicated ADHD brain. A boy kicked me and my forearm cracked. I barely noticed. I was used to violence, but not like this. The adrenaline had me sprinting as fast as I could when I shouldn't have been able to stand. Nyx's invisible scales slithered against my neck as she lunged in every direction. Hands held me down. They fell away, convulsing. I backed away through the fog, trying to put distance between myself and the fighting. I love when authors don't even attempt to write coherent fight scenes and just kind of keep everything as vague as possible so they don't actually have to put in the work. Zeus and a dozen men jumped over the edge of the wall and landed in the sand with bent knees. Their animals followed. The wall was at least 5 stories tall. This is so cringe. She really made all these losers do the superhero landing? Shut the fuck up. Oh my god. She really thought that this was so cool to write. It's also super confusing because the dozen men that just did that embarrassing superhero landing are all supposed to be mentors for the Crucible, and each are assigned one of the surviving Spartans. Alexis gets 2 because she's so special, and to no one's surprise, she gets assigned to Achilles and Patroclus. No, I will not at any point in this video be referring to his stupidest nickname. But correct me if I'm wrong, that still leaves one of the 12 mentors without a student, because Alexis was the only one with an extra mentor. I love how the author makes a huge deal about her female main character being a mathematical genius. Meanwhile, she can't even do basic addition. Anyway, Patroclus and Achilles do their tough guy, we hate you and don't care about you and you disgust us speech that straight women seem to get all wet over. My sister in Christ, if a man being a piece of shit is what gets you all hot and bothered, I have great news for you. All you have to do is go outside and you will find your very own book talk love interest on every block. I also thought it was super weird because they were like, you're an Olympian and we hate Olympians, and I'm wondering how they even know that. Literally no one knows who her parents are. How do you know whether she's chthonic or Olympian? Alexis now has to spend the next 2 weeks living with Achilles and Patroclus before entering the Crucible for the next year. Boy, I wonder what could go wrong in that period of time. Alexis gets treated by some doctors that Achilles and Patroclus then immediately talk about wanting to kill afterwards for reasons entirely unknown, and she drifts in and out of sleep for several days, and during a brief moment of lucidity, she has a conversation with Nyx, who is still somehow only visible to Alexis. During a rare moment of lucidity, Nyx said something about Medusa. What did she say? We don't know. But she's in the underworld, I rasped quietly, my throat like sandpaper. She used the Titans to attack the house of Zeus. I tilted my head up. Nyx hissed. I don't believe it. She snapped her teeth with a click. Then she passes out again. This is never brought up again and is completely irrelevant to the story. I also want to point out that these Spartans use Kronos when speaking the same way that we use God as an exclamation. You know, Kronos, the Titan. But none of the Titans in this book that the Spartans fight are the actual Titans of Greek myth. So it's all just very confusing and incredibly irritating. Patros stopped at the door and looked back. She's under the protection of the houses of Ares and Aphrodite. Do anything to harm her, and no one will ever find you. The woman gulped. Understood! Patro bellowed, eyes filling with blood, and I jolted at the ferocity of his voice. 2 things. 1, why are you shouting? 2, his eyes filled with blood? What does that mean? Are you trying to say that they turned red, or is blood literally coming out of their eyes a la True Blood? This is why it's important to be clear with your descriptors, because I have no idea what I'm supposed to be picturing. There is a difference between your eyes being a blood red color and literal blood filling your eyes. Also, Achilles and Patroclus have a wolf and Nemean jaguar, which I looked up and that doesn't exist in Greek lore. Nemea is where the Nemean Games were held, and in Greek lore, there was the story of the Nemean lion, which is the beast Hercules, not Hercules, killed during his 12 trials. Nowhere in mythology does it mention a Nemean jaguar. I don't know why this jaguar needed to be Nemean specifically, because none of the other animal companions in this story are Nemean, so it just makes zero sense. Anyway, throughout this entire chapter, the wolf and jaguar are present, but all they do is growl and hiss like literally every other page. There's really no reason for them to be present, and they don't serve any purpose in the chapter except to repeatedly try to be intimidating and literally nothing else. The amount of times I had to read about these stupid fucking animals hissing and growling is exhausting. I love animal companions. I'm all for animal companions, but if they're not actually going to contribute to the story in any way, they shouldn't be there. The author is trying so desperately to just throw in every cliche she can think of to make the characters in her book look cool. Like, this sounds like the exact kind of thing I would have written about when I was in the 8th grade. One of the doctors starts info dumping onto Alexis, and therefore the reader, about more world building stuff in yet another display of lazy and uncreative exposition. And she starts talking about the new marriage laws that's recently been passed that will fix the fertility issues that Spartans are having. But the new marriage law is going to fix all that. Thank Kronos, she beamed. Everyone's talking about it. It's genius, making all citizens of Sparta take a marriage oath when they turn 26. Well, everyone but the house leaders, obviously. No one tells them what to do. How is marrying at the age of 26 going to make it easier to have children? Is this some kind of weird rhetoric that younger women are more fertile? The best part, the doctor continued, oblivious to my mental breakdown, they put in a clause that listed out all 10 of the chthonic names and stated they were restricted from only marrying someone on that list. Chthonic leaders refused to comply if chthonics were wholly forbidden from marrying each other, so the Federation compromised and added the only. Either way, they must marry an Olympian. I read this paragraph like 10 times, and I still have no clue what it means. After the doctor leaves, Alexis is alone with Achilles and Patroclus, and they have literally the most juvenile conversation. You smell and look repulsive, Patro pointed at a door on the far wall. Use the shower and make yourself presentable. Being around you in this state is disgusting and a dishonor to our houses. If you were an heiress, the leaders would pass out with horror when they saw how impure you are. Also, try not to slip and break your neck, he said. That would be inconvenient. Patro narrowed his eyes. Understood, he asked softly. Crystal clear, I whispered. Good. Great. Fantastic. Fabulous. Stupendous. Superb. Absolutely riveting storytelling, Jasmine. Truly a wordsmith of the highest caliber. This next part is unclear because it says an hour later she's standing in the shower, and it's unclear if it took her an hour just to get up and get into the shower, or if she's been in the shower for an hour just standing under the water. Take notes, authors. Making your writing clear is extremely important. I also need to point out that for the 100th time in this book, there is classical music playing in her head because her only two character traits are that she likes math and classical music, and the author has to remind you quite literally every other page. At any given moment, this girl is playing classical music in her head, and it's of the utmost importance to the author that you know to the point of being needlessly repetitive. Honestly, Alexis with the classical music is worse than the marine grade polymer from It Ends With Us. Jasmine literally will not shut up about it. Girl, we get it. You have zero personality. Also, this isn't actually important, but I did catch this little bit of inconsistency, and when I hate a book, I will nitpick the ever-loving shit out of it. I just fought to the death and watched a stadium cheer over the murder of dozens of boys. Remember how earlier it said that there was 20 Spartans in the Initiation Massacre, and only 10 would be allowed to survive? That means that 10 would have been killed. Even if there had been 20 men plus Alexis, that's still only 21, which means that only 11 had been killed. Listen, I'm not the greatest at math either, but this is just embarrassing. Hold on one moment. Alexa, is it possible to pass the bar exam if you can't count? I don't actually have an Alexa, I'm just being an asshole. Alexis asks Nyx if she's her guardian animal and if that's why she can see and speak to her, but Nyx says she's bonded to someone else, but they're gone, and because of her Spartan oath, she's unable to talk about that person directly. Once again, this is never brought up ever again. Achilles and Patroclus both seem to think that Alexis is a child of Zeus because she has golden skin and hair and one of her eyes is gray, and that's apparently what Zeus looks like, so they decide to just run with that. They give Alexis a book about Spartan history because she's fully ignorant about Spartans and doesn't know what the Crucible is, which is what she's about to go through over the next year. So instead of making sure she's prepared so that she survives and they become generals, Patroclus just throws a book at her and tells her to not be a complete savage the next time he sees her. I think it's so funny when one character's success hinges on the survival of another's. Instead of actually putting in the work to make sure that they get what they want, they just go, hey, don't fuck this up for me. Patroclus and Achilles are both some of the worst love interests I've ever read. Straight women are wild, I tell you what. I don't understand how anyone can possibly goon to this. All Sparta is divided by one mental test, one of which paranoia inhabits, sleep deprivation another, and starvation the third. What others in their own language call pain is, in our Spartan War Academy, the Crucible. The river Styx separates the Dolomites from the Academy. The drowning and running separate them from the mind. Of all these, the cunning are the bravest, because they are the farthest from civilization and refinement. Their minds don't break when the rest shatter. Chat, can anyone tell me what this paragraph means? Because it's really confusing, and I'm struggling to figure out if I'm an idiot or if the author's writing is just that unintelligible. Honestly, reading that part gave me flashbacks to Age of Scorpius. The book detailed ad nauseum the importance of pain, suffering, dirt, fear, and hunger. Confusingly, it referred to the Crucible as a mental test, but then constantly described it as a war. Later, the book repeated, it is the right of the Crucible to break those it has conquered so they have no shelter from themselves. If you must break a man, do it to reveal power. In all other cases, kill him. And the last line read, there are no stupid gods because there are no stupid Spartans. The Crucible or death, there is no third option. Okay, so basically the Crucible is a survival of the fittest situation. The author just decided to write it in the most incoherent way possible. Cool, I'm glad that it took 4 paragraphs just to make that clear. People read this book unironically, for fun. People actually enjoyed this. Okay, so apparently Alexis actually has a third personality trait, and that is that she's an idiot who thinks birds are government drones. It was just no one had proved birds weren't spying on us. Also, why were they always flying around? Where were they going? What were they doing? Why were they always singing? Suspicious. Morning chirps echoed through the windows, and my eyes widened. They've got us surrounded. Why are dogs always barking? Why do mice scurry around? What do turtles do when they disappear under the water? Suspicious. God, this book is so cringy. Was Jasmine 13 when she wrote this? I looked up her age, and apparently she's 28, or at least she was at the time her about page was written. And this book came out in 2024. So she wasn't 13 when she wrote this, but honestly, that just makes it even more embarrassing. This woman is only a few years younger than me, and she writes like a teenager. The day before she goes to the Crucible, Alexis asks Patroclus what the plan is, and he tells her it's just to survive. And if she can make it to the end of July, then they'll talk about strategy. And then she becomes rightfully angry and tells them they've given up on her before they've even tried. And then this shit stain tries to argue that they stand to lose more than she does because her life may be on the line, but their whole world is on the line if they can't get a seat on the Spartan Federation as generals. Okay, big guy, if that's the case, then why aren't you putting more into making sure she survives? At the Crucible, we're introduced to some general named Cleandro, who is just that typical military officer that screams in his recruits' faces, and I could not take this part seriously because this man is shouting at the top of his lungs about how the Crucible is the most civilized test in the world that separates animals from God. Yeah, because making teenagers fight each other to the death is super civilized. Achilles and Patroclus are both very clearly well-adjusted, civilized, and not at all violent, animalistic individuals. I haven't mentioned this before, but Achilles literally wears a muzzle like 24/7 because that's how civilized they are. Until next January, you will not eat when you are here unless we say so. Spoiler, we won't. You will also not bathe, and you will not sleep unless you're seconds from death, and if you're injured, you'll heal yourself. There will be no doctors to coddle you. Did the centuries-old military veteran just say spoiler? That's another thing that I've noticed about this book is almost every single character in it talks like they're teenagers. I get the cringy dialogue for Alexis because she's 19 years old, but even Patroclus sounds like a teenager when he speaks. And honestly, I think that just might be how the author herself talks, because this is an excerpt from her about page. I'm currently 28 years old, living with my husband and cat named Boo. When I'm not writing, I spend all my time reading on AO3, parentheses, the best website ever created. Slow burn enemies to lovers only. One of the teachers is Charon, spelled with a K. I made sure to Google this to make sure I was correct. It appears that CH Charon is interchangeable with KH, but in original Greek myth, Charon was the ferryman of the underworld. In this book, he is the child of Artemis, one of the virgin goddesses, and Erebus. It says that she specifically had him in order to get revenge on the Olympians who killed all of her daughters, which the OG Artemis never had any to begin with. So he's just this crazed, violent monster that they refer to as the Hunter. OG Charon was just a guy with a boat. Why is every character so wildly misinterpreted from the source material? At this point, the author should have just had this be completely separated from Greek mythology. She still could have had this be a post-apocalyptic setting with immortals set in her weird violence porn edgelord college without trying to make it Greek, because at the core of this story, there is zero relation to actual Greek lore. Also, throughout the entire story, Alexis is so infuriatingly antisocial for no reason. For example, another Spartan mutt from the House of Zeus tries to introduce himself to her, and just like every other character that tries to have any interaction with her, she's immediately dismissive of them, either because of their intelligence, or she just automatically assumes they're a creep without any kind of prior evidence. You'd think that when you're thrust into a torture college with zero knowledge or experience, and your own mentors won't put any effort into trying to help you succeed, you'd want to make some kind of alliance with people who aren't hostile towards you to increase your chances of survival. That's another thing that's incredibly boring and unfulfilling about this book. Alexis has exactly one friend, Nyx, who is more like an accessory that drops lame one-liners every now and then than an actual fleshed out and interesting secondary character. We are a third into this book, and so far she has made zero meaningful connections with any other characters. If you've seen any of my other videos, that's kind of my big thing, is character relationships and dynamic. I can overlook a mediocre or even non-existent plot if the characters are at least compelling. I want to see complex dynamics. I want to see characters progress and change based on the relationships they build. But Alexis is such a boring character because she's so uninterested in the rest of the people around her. The author throws in a ridiculous amount of unimportant side characters that are not only impossible to keep track of, but as a reader, you have zero interest in them because they're not deemed worthy of any attention by the main character. So instead, the story is just chock full of 100 filler characters that we don't know anything about and don't really care to because of the way they're ignored by the main character. This also isn't a very efficient school because during class, if someone called on gets an answer wrong, the entire class is forced to run up a mountain, back down, and then swim across the river Styx while Charon chases after them, and if he catches you, he kills you. Literally, their first class, someone gets a question wrong, and instead of continuing the curriculum, they spend a ridiculous amount of time running around, and then one of the students dies when Charon drowns him, and then they're booted off to the next class. So basically, they learned nothing from their first class because they didn't even get to finish the lesson plan. There's absolutely no reason to be killing off Spartans to this degree if they are struggling to produce children and there's not enough Spartans to fight off the Titans that have quite literally destroyed the world. There is no rhyme or reason to why things are this way. Jasmine Moss just has a violence boner. And it's at this point where we start getting POV chapters from the men. Ew. This particular chapter is from Charon's point of view. I stood in the boat, dying of boredom as I waited for the idiot boys to finish their first lap of the circuit. When the Federation had randomly forced me to work the Crucible this year, parentheses, a decision that still didn't make any sense, I'd assumed the torturing of Olympian spawn would make it a little fun. I was wrong. Ennui had set in. My fingers itched with the urge to palm my knife and stab something. Preferably someone. Hell let out a yawn of boredom, and Hound flopped over, which caused the boat to rock. Yes, I named my Hellhound protectors what they were. No one else could see them anyway. Just another perk of having a monstrous creature lineage. Okay, Ebony, Darkness, Dementia, Raven Way. Half of this POV chapter is just Charon internally monologuing about how he's so savage and bloodthirsty and tortured and how much he hates the weak Olympians. I couldn't recall the last time I'd slept. The problem was the second I lay down, my subconscious tortured me with the heinous memories. So I stayed awake. I didn't run from my demons. I fed them. And now, I was the demon. The Olympians called me many names. Insomniac, sociopath, hunter, killer. All of them were true. I don't know why, but for some reason, when I was reading this chapter, all I could think about was below average man's TikTok. So after that, I could only imagine Charon as this guy. Anyway, it turns out that while they were swimming from Charon, the guy who died was actually being killed by Alexis. I guess she has some power that she doesn't know about or how to control, but yeah, all of a sudden this dude starts screaming bloody murder, and whatever is happening to him isn't Charon's doing. After witnessing this, Charon instantly becomes obsessed with Alexis, and now he wants to hunt her because he's a weirdo creep. Alexis is back with Achilles and Patroclus after surviving the first 2 weeks of the academy, and once again, they have the most childish and cringy interactions I've ever read in my life. Nostrils flaring, Patro cracked his muscles. Genuine question, what in the fucker is wrong with you? Who writes like this? Who enjoyed this writing? This part was particularly offensive to read. Suddenly, the old beliefs that women had hysteria problems didn't seem so far-fetched. I could see it. Case in point, I was a woman, and I was hysterical. Maybe I'm just extra sensitive because I read this book very soon after reading The Spirit Bares Its Teeth, which is a horror highlighting the medical abuse of women and queer people. And while the made-up illness was not hysteria, veil sickness was pretty much an allegory for female hysteria. But the point is that absolutely heinous shit was done to women under the justification of treating an illness that never existed and was used as a way to abuse and subjugate women for years. And the fact that the author wrote this line in such a dismissive and joking way was honestly so fucking insensitive. Like, why did that need to be in the story at all? It didn't. It added absolutely nothing to the narrative. I'm not even a woman, and I would never just flippantly joke about hysteria the way this author did. I think Jasmine is just an insensitive piece of shit, and there'll be other examples later down the line. Anyway, Charon shows up out of nowhere and pretty much alludes to wanting to marry Alexis when the topic of new marriage laws comes up, and it's stated that he will be forced to marry now that he's 26. At this point, I actually don't know who the love interest is supposed to be. I thought it might either be Achilles or Patroclus or both at the same time because I heard that there was a gangbang or something in this book, but now I'm not so sure because Charon is the one talking about marrying her. This is supposed to be an enemies to lovers book, but I don't know who the lover is because literally every single character is her enemy for no reason. And that's another thing. I've talked about why I hate when straight people write enemies to lovers because it's only ever man hates woman and treats her like dog shit for absolutely no reason. But this has another layer that I hate because it isn't even proper enemies to lovers. It's more like bully romance. She isn't their enemy. She doesn't know these guys. She hasn't done anything to them. There's literally zero reason for them to hate her as much as they do. That's not enemies to lovers, baby. That's just men in general. Real enemies to lovers is when both parties have actual reasons to hate each other. You didn't write enemies to lovers, Jasmine. You just made all of your characters assholes and slapped on the trope to appeal to a wider audience. My kingdom for a straight woman who actually knows what enemies to lovers is. Anyway, there's this bit between Charon and Alexis. Glacial blue eyes burned with fury. If you dare harm yourself, he rasped softly, high cheekbones glinting like razor blades, I'll bring you back to life and torture you for all of eternity. Wait, is he just saying that to intimidate her? Because if this dude is actually capable of resurrecting people, why don't they just have him bring people back to life and solve the issue of declining Spartan population? Alright, that's because there's no rhyme or reason as to why things are the way that they are in this book. It's just mindless violence. My head throbbed. My vision was blurry. My abused throat burned from the force of my grief. I didn't want a mortal enemy. I just wanted to listen to 18th century music and solve obscure math equations. Maybe lie in some flower fields during the summer and swim in a warm lake. Marry Carl Goss and bear his children in the afterlife. Is that really too much to ask for? For those of you who don't know, Carl Goss is a German mathematician who died in 1855, and Alexis literally never shuts up about him because one of her 3 personality traits is that she's obsessed with math, and by extension, I guess she's horny for this guy. Every few hours, I took a scalding shower and scrubbed myself raw. Sometimes I cried in the water. Sometimes I laughed. And once, parentheses, 3 separate times, I flipped my curls over so I looked like a founding father and pretended to give a revolutionary speech, but each time my speech was too good, parentheses. The town sheriff shot me for insurrection and I flailed dramatically in the shower, died, while my fellow rebels watched in horror. Genuine question, does Jasmine Moss have ADHD? Because she writes like an unmedicated 15-year-old ADHDer with zero filter. And I say this as a currently unmedicated ADHDer because reading this book feels exactly like when I'm desperately trying to string coherent thoughts together. Except I don't suffer from rawr, so random XD syndrome the way Jasmine seems to. Also, it doesn't explicitly say it, but I'm pretty sure that Charon does an Edward Cullen and watches her sleep every night because Alexis has nightmares about some freaky guy who stalks her dreams on a daily basis. And there's no explanation for why, but this creep like holds onto her leg every single time he does it. I didn't really get that, but it's kind of a funny image. So, after spending another mindless 2 weeks at the Crucible where fuck all happens, one of the abandoned mutts approaches Alexis. Drex leaned forward and glanced around like he wanted to make sure no one was looking at us. "We're the only 2 people who grew up in the human world," he whispered. "There are only 8 of us left. We need all the support we can get. I propose the 2 of us form an alliance." I squinted. To do what? Is he trying to recruit me for a cult? I'd read that was a big problem happening these days. Dark times and all. You know, for a main character who's supposed to be super intelligent, Alexis sure is a fucking idiot. I'm supposed to believe that this moron graduated high school at the age of 16? Drex tries to strike a deal with Alexis. He struggles with the Spartan math class because the highest class his school offered was Calculus 3. So if she agrees to tutor him, he can ensure her protection because his power is super useful when it comes to combat. That's awesome! Things are finally getting interesting and deals are being struck, and Alexis is making connections with someone other than Nyx, who I would like to point out has not served any kind of role since the Initiation Massacre. Alexis doesn't have a clear strategy for surviving the Crucible, and now is her chance to ensure her survival. Except she tells him no, not for any actual reason. I don't know why the author even put that in if she wasn't going to do anything with it anyway. It was completely pointless. The next time they have to run the circus, Drex helps her out anyway without expecting anything in return, and I really wish he hadn't because as much as Alexis talks about wanting to die, nobody wishes for her untimely demise more than me. At least then, I wouldn't have to suffer through another 240 pages of possibly the worst book I've ever read in my life. Every time I do a deep dive, I keep thinking there's no way that anything could be as bad as what I am currently reading, and then somehow I'm miraculously proven wrong. I genuinely didn't think it was possible for someone's writing to be worse than safety measures, but Maeve Hazel looks like a literary genius compared to this book. Drex helps Alexis out again when she's harassed by another one of the bullies and his cronies, and because of that she decides she is going to tutor him in math. This entire chapter was pointless, and it would have made for a shorter read if we just skipped over all of that and just had her accept his offer in the first place. Here we go. We get an Augustus point of view chapter. Yay! I haven't actually talked about him, but Augustus is one of the professors as well as Patroclus' older brother. This guy also hates Alexis, but that's because she's the first woman participating in the Crucible, like, ever, and I guess that if she succeeds, then that means that all female Spartans will have to go through the same, and that pisses him off because he's paternalistic and female Spartans are already rare enough. But it still doesn't explain why Alexis is being forced to participate. There is no reasoning as to why she was suddenly dropped in instead of people trying to figure out what house she actually came from, and is not not being protected because she's one of only a handful of female Spartans in the entire world. But yeah, Augustus goes back and forth between feeling paternalistic towards her because she's a woman and hating her guts because she's participating in the Crucible, even though it was totally against her choice. Why isn't anyone going directly to the higher ups to question them? No one in this book actually uses common sense. The author, for some reason, just decided to write every single character hating on Alexis just for the sake of fulfilling her weird bully fetish. Out of nowhere, he suddenly gets a hard-on while internally raging at Alexis. I was older than her, and I was her professor. This was wrong on so many levels. Something about Alexis made me lose all control. She made me feral with rage. If I stay in this library another second, I'm going to murder both those boys for touching her, then kidnap and handcuff her to my bed. So, is Augustus also a potential love interest? Literally every man in this book simultaneously hates, yet is obsessed with Alexis, and I don't understand why, because she's probably the most boring protagonist I have ever read. Also, I just wanted to point out that none of the male POV chapters really serve the plot in any way. Every single one of them is literally only like 3 to 5 pages max, and literally the only purpose they serve is to show the reader how horny each man is for her. Their chapters don't add anything to the story. It's just them having raging boners over this boring ass girl. I just thought that was really funny. They didn't actually need to be there, but the author really wanted to drive home just how many psychopaths Alexis could pull without trying. This next chapter is pretty boring. Alexis gets caught by Spartan paparazzi who start taking pictures of her while she's swimming. Charon violently murders them because he's an obsessive lunatic, and later that night, Alexis spies on Patroclus sucking Achilles' dick. Great news, it took Jasmine 250 pages, but she finally got something accurate regarding Greek mythos, and that being that Achilles and Patroclus are lovers. Unfortunately, she already performed the most heinous character assassination known to man beforehand, so I had zero emotional reaction to the scene because every character in this book is garbage. All of the initiates are taken to what's called the menagerie in order to try and connect with an animal protector. For some reason, all of the animals run away from Alexis, probably because they can sense how much of an obnoxious idiot she is and don't want anything to do with her. Relatable. If I ever met this girl in real life, I'd run as fast as I could too. All except this weird puppy thing that she decides to name Fluffy Jr. after the stray husky she and Charlie adopted, because she's also apparently so unoriginal that she's incapable of coming up with literally any other dog name. She tells Nyx she's not gonna bond with this thing, but before leaving the menagerie, she says she'll come back for it. So, which is it? Also, Nyx is almost as annoying as Alexis is. She serves absolutely no purpose, and the only thing she ever does is sleep and threaten to bite people to death. I'm not kidding. Every single one of their conversations is just about her wanting to bite something and kill it, and Alexis telling her not to. After the first 20 times, it really started to get tiring. Every single character in this book is so repetitive and one-dimensional. Alexis has another run-in with Augustus because all the initiates are given leave to attend something called the Symposium, but he doesn't want Alexis going there because apparently it's no place for women. Alexis tells him she doesn't need him looking out for her and she can make her own decisions. And in response to that, this garbage fire of a man uses his mind torture powers on her to the point where her eyes and nose and ears are all bleeding. In his earlier chapter, he got all uppity about other men hurting women and talked about feeling protective of women, but apparently doesn't have any issues physically and mentally torturing them when they don't do what he wants, because that's exactly what he just did to Alexis for telling him no. I love how this is supposed to be enemies to lovers, but Alexis isn't even an enemy because she's literally not done anything to this guy. He's just violent and abusive and controlling for no reason. It's honestly super gross. There is not a single decent man in this book. Alexis gets to the Symposium, and on the surface, it just seems kind of like one of those high-end men's clubs where they all wear suits and smoke cigars while someone plays the piano. Zeus shows up because all of a sudden he's taken an interest in Alexis since everyone seems to think she's one of his abandoned kids. And I'm sat here thinking, why has it taken him so long to look into into her. It's literally been like 2 months since the initiation massacre, so why is he only just now taking an interest in this person who might be his child, especially if she's the first female Spartan mutt to be born in centuries? Again, I'm wondering why more people aren't taking her existence more seriously when there's only a handful of Spartan women in the entire world and no one knew about her until just a few months ago. Instead, they just threw the first woman to be born in a really long time into a series of death games for literally no reason. Anyway, the whole club suddenly turns into a wild orgy when a bunch of naked sirens come out and everyone loses all sense but Alexis. In an earlier chapter, it was explained that sirens speak a language that no one else can understand, and I guess because of that, they're basically only allowed to be sex workers. It really makes no sense and is also really gross, but based on everything else that I've read in this book, Jasmine isn't exactly the most skilled when it comes to extremely sensitive topics, so we can just add poorly handled topics of sex work on top of all the terrible things about her writing. Anyway, a siren ends up speaking to Alexis and she can actually understand what she's saying, which causes the siren to break down into tears because this is the first time she's ever met someone who could understand her. Instead of it being this hard-hitting emotional moment, it reads more like a random drunk girl you met in the bathroom of a bar. She flung her head back, long silky hair sparkling, and then she burst into tears. I've always wanted to be able to talk to someone in Sparta. Falling onto my lap, she convulsed with sobs. Parentheses. Still very naked. I didn't do it. I don't know what that line meant, but it's there. I patted her back awkwardly. Let it out, sister. She cried harder. Nyx thinks that Alexis must actually have the power to understand and speak to any sentient creatures because of the fact that she can communicate with Nyx and now the siren. And Alexis is super happy because this means she's not powerless. That doesn't really explain what Charon was talking about when he said that she was killing that one initiate. She probably has 2 powers because she's the main character and has to be special. Anyway, this was a really dumb way for her to find out that she has an ability. Alexis starts getting chummy with the sirens and plays games with them while under the influence because the food is laced with ambrosia, which is an upper, and that's really cool that the main character is essentially fed the equivalent of pot brownies without being told they're pot brownies, and this isn't treated as concerning at all. Also, apparently centaurs are actually human-bodied with horse heads. This isn't important to the story, I just thought I'd throw that in because once again, Jasmine Moss has decided to take Greek lore and completely change everything about it until it resembles nothing of the source material. Alexis loses a game and all the sirens are trying to get her to strip naked like the rest of them. I also had an issue with this part because the sirens are all hypersexual. Like, that is quite literally the only thing they talk about. So I thought that it was super weird that Jasmine created an entire race of people whose only purpose and interest is having sex. There's no conversation about how messed up it is that they're all confined to a club and used as entertainment and have zero agency. Alexis doesn't actually get naked, but as a joke, she kind of strip teases. And then out of nowhere, the guy who has been playing the piano at the club turns out to be Charon, and he and Augustus both lose their collective shit over this. Augustus physically assaults her by grabbing her by the throat because I guess he didn't like her showing a little skin when quite literally every single person in the room is buck-ass naked and actively having coitus. It was a simple question. His breath tickled my ear as he squeezed my neck tighter. Why are you taking your clothes off in public? Professor, I whispered as he choked me. What are you doing? He leaned close, dark eyes feral. I'm taking control, Alexis, he said silkily. Why are you taking your clothes off in this sex club where everyone else is taking their clothes off? Shut the fuck up, Augustus. Do straight women really find this behavior sexy? They literally have zero relationship at this point, and he's literally assaulting her and controlling her like this. What a piece of shit. Warm lips brushed against the shell of my ear. You have no idea just what you've done with your little display. What you've started. A restraining order, I hope? Goosebumps exploded down my spine. He inhaled deeply, then let out a guttural moan like he couldn't help himself. Excuse me. The sirens try to help Alexis out by blocking Augustus and getting her away from them, but one of them is a male, and him touching Alexis sends Augustus into a rage. Before I could do anything, Augustus grabbed Oron by the back of the neck and ripped him away. How dare you touch her, Augustus snarled. Then he chucked the siren across the room like he weighed nothing. If anyone in Sparta lays a single finger on Alexis, they answer to me, he roared into the room. What is this man's problem? This book is so fucking gross. All of the characters are either stupid or just concerningly toxic and abusive. Augustus tries to command Alexis to leave, and when she tells him no, he throws her over his shoulder and marches her out anyway. This man is so disgusting. This is her teacher, not her guardian, and he just does whatever he wants and treats her like shit and actively takes away her agency and free will, and I'm supposed to find this hot? Genuine question, is Jasmine Moss, like, okay? Like, is she good? Kid, Nyx whispered as she clung to my upside down neck. I think Augustus really is into you. Like, really into you. I shook my head and breathed deeply. No way, I said softly. He hates me. Yes way, Nyx shivered. He's wild for you. Practically savage. You're in deep shit, sister. This is way worse than I thought. He hates you so much, he wants to fight. In the bedroom. Throughout the book, Alexis has on multiple occasions expressed fear and loathing of Augustus and Charon. She doesn't like it when people touch her in general, and on every other occasion, Nyx is super gung-ho about the idea of killing anyone who poses a threat to Alexis. But when one of them becomes violent and forceful, suddenly Nyx is like, oh yeah girl, he wants you bad. Remember how he nearly melted her brain and then grabbed her by the throat? Where is Nyx's protectiveness when this controlling, fragile Giga-Chad becomes volatile and physically harms Alexis the moment she does something he doesn't like? God, it gets even worse. The next day, Alexis finds a present with her name on it, and when she opens it up, it has the eyes, nose, and finger of the male siren that had tried to help Alexis when she was being physically accosted by Augustus. So now we can mark violence against sex workers who did nothing wrong on our list of problematic things that Jasmine has written her love interests doing. That's super great. We love that. It's not as if they don't already face enough violence in real life. We get another Charon POV chapter, and it's literally just Charon at the symposium getting hard over Alexis and then abusing a siren. A male siren whimpered as he pressed himself flush against me. Growling, I pulled my hand away and shoved the man off me. He fell to the ground and I kicked him. Hey Jasmine, what's your deal with harming sex workers? Why are your main love interests killing and hurting innocent sex workers for no reason? What was the point of that? Hey Jasmine, do you hate sex workers? Why did you create a race that is only reduced to sex and then needlessly harm them for the sake of drama and showing how edgy your toxic main male characters are? So now this book has officially wandered into the realm of bad writing, straight into wildly insensitive. Then we have a 2-month time skip. Drapes fluttered as wind gusted and shadows elongated with the setting sun. So I pulled up the hood of my oversized emotional support sweatshirt. Someone had left the black garment on my chair in my room weeks ago, right after the box incident. And since the material was ridiculously soft, parentheses, the nicest thing I'd ever felt or worn, it was now mine. The skull on the front, which was sticking up its middle finger, had grown on me. Fluck the flucking world. Life's a biatch like that. Yes, I was in my emo era. No, I didn't want to talk about it. That was the point. However, as a commitment to the lifestyle, I was experimenting with swearing in my mind. I love how after writing unnecessary violence towards a marginalized group who already deal with enough violence in real life, the author thought it would be cute to immediately segue into this. Anyway, they're back at the Crucible and they're forced to run the circuit by Augustus because one of the students moved his seat to try and talk to Alexis, and because he's an aggressive, possessive fuckhead who is so insecure that he can't even stand seeing another dude speak to the woman that he's decided belongs to him, he punishes everyone over the dumbest little reason. So that makes it all Augustus's fault when everyone is attacked by a titan on the mountain pass and one of the students is killed and Alexis nearly dies. But it's okay because the useless female main character is rescued by the other violent and controlling as obsessive main male love interest. How romantic! This part was really weird because Charon starts screaming at her about putting herself in danger. Technically, it was Augustus who put her in danger because she wouldn't have even been out there if it weren't for his irrational jealousy issues. But anyway, he's screaming at her and being really aggressive, and that kind of triggers her, and suddenly he's being like, oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Is it alright if I touch you? I need to get you back to the academy. What? Charon and Augustus were perfectly fine with being violent towards her, touching her without her permission, and altogether robbing her of any kind of agency at any given point. So the fact that he's done a complete 180 and is really concerned about getting her consent is super weird. He and Augustus immediately get weird and violent again when a doctor tries to treat Alexis's injuries. What the fuck do you think you're doing? A voice whipped cruelly from somewhere beside me. The doctor froze. I'm putting the newest healing cream on her wounds. You asked me to treat her. This should close the skin in hours. Lay a finger on her, the voice said calmly, and I'll cut off both your hands. Then I'll shove them down your throat. Then, while you're busy choking, I'll skin you alive. The doctor recoiled and dropped the tub of cream. Calm down. There's no need to worry, said a second, more reasonable voice. If he touches her, I'll stab him. You put the cream on her. Damn, girl can't even get treated by a doctor without these two being fucking creeps. Imagine being in the most suffocating relationship with two people that you're not even dating and they've just decided you're their girlfriend anyway. How does this book have 4 stars on Goodreads? We get another Charon POV chapter, and suddenly he's having second thoughts about this plan he and Augustus have for Alexis because of the way she reacted when he was screaming at her. Someone hurt her, I whispered as I clawed at the neck of my shirt with my right hand, popping buttons so I could breathe. Badly. Very fucking badly. I don't know about our plan, I said as I waved the gun and tried to breathe. If she's been hurt before, maybe we should. The plan goes forward. Augustus cut me off harshly. It's more reason for us to act quickly. She needs our protection, and we'll fucking give it to her. Weird how he didn't care about everything he's been doing to her up until this point until he realized that she's been traumatized. I love when men are only capable of basic empathy towards women when she's suffered to a degree that they deem is worthy of said empathy. It's real charming and romantic. It's coming up to the end of the year, and now it's time to officially make their bond with their animal protectors at the menagerie, and Alexis is worrying because all of the animals run away from her, so her chances of bonding with an animal aren't looking good. Except, what about Fluffy Jr.? He's hung out with her every single time she's come to the menagerie, so why is she suddenly acting like she's doomed and won't get an animal companion? You literally named it, you fucking idiot. It's really obvious where this is going to go. Why is the narrative suddenly acting like it wasn't shoving this hint down our throats every other time before? Once again, for someone who's supposed to be a genius with the best scores in her class, Alexis is a fucking moron, and I'm so tired of the author trying to convince me otherwise. And that's exactly what happens, to absolutely no one's surprise. For some reason, even getting an animal companion seems to piss Augustus off, because he gets really accusatory like, "What is that? Isn't it obvious, my dude? It's the protector everyone was supposed to get today. Are you stupid?" He even almost uses his powers on her again. Wow, so romantic. We love men who use their violent brain-melting powers on the women they've decided are their property, just because he disagrees with something she's done. Truly, a paragon of love interests. The summary refers to him as a morally gray love interest. That's not morally gray, babes. That's just abuse. Augustus is abusive. Glad that we could clear all that up. Literally out of nowhere, Patroclus starts treating Alexis like they're chums, which is super weird, because if you remember, he was super cruel for no reason, and convinced that she was going to die and ruin his chances of becoming a general. I love how the author wrote every single character vehemently hating Alexis for absolutely no reason, and then suddenly like her when literally nothing has changed. She just decided that it's time for them to stop being needlessly cruel and love her because she's the cool main character that everyone cares about. On another topic, Patro said, "You never told us. Did you ever figure out what your power is?" "Yeah, I did," I said with a gasp. "I can talk to sentient creatures in their language. I can talk to sirens and some other creatures I've met." Patro's face transformed with excitement. He'd never done this around me. I choked again. He was breathtaking when he smiled. "Wait, that's actually amazing," Patro said. "That's the least lame Olympian power I've ever heard of. Congrats!" I highly doubt that there's never been an Olympian power cooler than being multilingual. But because Alexis is the main character, everything she does has to be so cool and everyone has to be so impressed with her. Patro slapped my back. "We're gonna make a Spartan out of you yet. I always knew we got lucky when we got you as our mentee." You literally didn't. But okay. So remember when I said that I couldn't tell if the love interests were Achilles and Patroclus or Augustus and Charon? Apparently, it's all 4. "We're usually not interested in other people," Patro continued with a blush. He glanced at me like he was trying to convey something important. "But we've recently..." Achilles shook his head. I waited, but Patro never finished his sentence. Alexis has 0 relationships with any of these men, and Patroclus and Augustus are brothers. What are they gonna do? Are they gonna fuck the same woman, or what is happening? I also want to point out that one of Alexis's classmates is also very clearly into her, and I'm just like, how does she have 5 guys slobbering over her when she has the personality of a wet piece of cardboard and literally doesn't do anything? We are 80% in, and so far nothing interesting plot-wise has happened. Alexis hasn't accomplished anything noteworthy this entire story. She's literally just bumbling her way through this torture school while multiple abusive gigachads play rock, paper, scissors on who gets to spit roast her. Anyway, the classmate who has the hots for her tells her he likes her and then kisses her without her permission, and it's really weird because every time a man has touched her before, Alexis has reacted very viscerally. But when a guy she doesn't even like suddenly kisses her out of nowhere, she's like, huh. and then doesn't have any kind of reaction or thoughts on the matter. After kissing her, this classmate goes missing, and everyone thinks he's just defected, but Alexis gets another present with his eyes and fingers inside, and it's super obvious that he was killed by Augustus and Charon because they stalk Alexis 24/7 and are also psychopaths. It's the night before graduation, and the initiates attend a masquerade in their honor where every member of Sparta is present. At this ball, two men in masks, who are obviously Augustus and Charon, corner Alexis, and even though she turned down the offer to dance twice, they force her onto the dance floor with them anyway. Both men took a step forward. They had already been extremely close to begin with. Now we were pressed flush together. It was obscene. My uncovered nipples rubbed against the hard planes of a muscular chest. I just need to say that her nipples aren't actually out. She's just not wearing a bra under the dress. That particular line made it sound like she's topless. She's not. The hands gripping my hips from behind moved slowly forward across my torso. Inch by inch, they trailed higher. I'd never been touched so intimately before. Their bodies shifted as we spun faster, blocking me from everyone's view. Gloved fingers traveled up higher, higher, higher. They brushed across my nipples possessively. "Why the fuck," said the man pressed against my front, "are these out? You really can't take care of yourself, can you?" Cool. So we can now mark down sexual harassment on the list of problematic shit that Jasmine Moss romanticizes in her writing. Despite being super resistant to any kind of physical contact throughout the entirety of the book, for some reason, Alexis is super into being fondled on the dance floor by two people she thinks are strangers, which is extremely out of character, but you can really tell that the author didn't want to get SA accusations by using the excuse that Alexis actually liked it. At that moment, the man behind me tweaked his fingers wickedly across my chest, and it was unmistakable what he was referring to. Stars sparkled in my vision. I moaned and tipped my head back, rested it against a muscled chest. Both men groaned, roughly. Weirdly enough, two men groping her wasn't what causes her to go into fight or flight mode, but the conversation topic of her being poor does. Which makes so much sense, of course. They're playing with you. Got something in my teeth. They're playing with you. This is all a game. I felt sick. "I have a question," I asked softly. Both men bent down to listen, wolves leaning closer to devour. I slammed my knee up into the front man's crotch, then rammed my elbow back. Powerful legs clamped around my raised thigh, so my knee was pressed against hardness, and I couldn't move. The man in front let out a throaty groan. The man behind me pushed his hips forward. A bulge dug into my lower back. His chest vibrated against me. "What was your question?" the man behind asked wickedly. His hips flexed. "Let me go," I demanded, and I tried to pull away, but once again, they didn't budge an inch. They groaned wantonly. "Hey, Jasmine! This is SA. That's SA. This is the exact reason I don't read dark romance. There's a difference between having a romance with dark themes and just writing literal assault. This isn't dark romance, Jasmine just has a rape fetish. After getting molested one last time, Patroclus and his sister Helen interrupt them, and Alexis ends up dancing with her math professor, and it starts off innocent enough, but immediately after the dance, he pulls the whole, "now that you're not my student, we should smash" bullshit. Which, of course he would, because every man on the planet suddenly wants to bone this woman. It was at this point that I started to wonder if Alexis isn't some self-insert, because that's like 6 or 7 men at this point who all have had unsavory intentions towards Alexis, even though she's quite literally the most obnoxious and undesirable main character I've ever seen. The party gets crashed when Titans attack out of nowhere, and in the chaos, Alexis and Helen get snatched up and teleported to some abandoned shack. I didn't mention this earlier, but on 2 different occasions, Alexis has received vaguely threatening notes telling her that she had until graduation to leave the Crucible, and it turns out that the one leaving the notes was the heir to Zeus's house, Theros. This would have been some shocking revelation if it weren't for the fact that I completely forgot that this man existed, because he's barely mentioned throughout the story at all. I want to say he showed up maybe twice. It was really funny getting this big bad reveal and my reaction being, who is this person again? Pretty much, Alexis was starting to get a lot of attention from Zeus after surviving the Crucible and getting top marks, and Theros got real pissy about that. Way in the beginning, it mentioned in passing that the House of Zeus was having fertility issues, but it turns out that they just have no children because Theros keeps killing them off, and now he is going to kill Alexis and Helen. Well, he's not going to kill them, but he draws a Titan to that location and leaves them to get got. Alexis gets out of her bonds by breaking her hand so that she can slip out of the rope, and is in the process of cutting Helen free when the Titan shows up. Instead of a cool fight scene where the main character shows her strength and takes down a Titan, she and Helen teleport away. But this is supposed to be impressive, I guess, because she's never done it before, and she ends up teleporting directly to Augustus and Charon. Also, I thought that this was really funny because in this scene, they're described as wearing long black togas with fur cloaks, but at the masquerade, they were wearing suits. So that means that these guys did a whole wardrobe change after the events of the party crash and Alexis and Helen getting kidnapped. Apparently, finding them wasn't a priority. Charon took a step forward, face contorted as he stared down at my ruined hands and clawed up arms. Augustus went unnaturally still beside him, and his face paled until his scar was a stark slash of red. Who the fuck did this to you? Charon's raspy voice increased in decibels until he was shouting at me at the top of his lungs. Give me their name! This is the most overdramatic who did this to you scenario I've ever seen. And technically, if we're talking about her broken hands, she did that to herself. Augustus pulled out a gun and unclicked the safety, his eyes wild. You know, Jasmine really likes her guns. Like, at any given moment, these guys are just whipping guns and knives out. What are you gonna shoot, dumbass? It's just you four. What are you, the head of the NRA? Put that away. Okay, so apparently everyone from the masquerade is actually present, and they are all also wearing togas because they are at the location where the graduation takes place. That means that an initiate and the heiress of one of the main houses disappeared, and instead of doing a search, everyone got ready for a graduation ceremony. Are you kidding me? Not a single person went looking for them after the commotion died down and they noticed that they were missing? What is this book? Alexis goes feral and attacks Theros, and in this scene we actually discover that Alexis isn't an Olympian, but a chthonic, which I knew before this point because it was explained that Olympian powers felt like euphoria in your head, while the use of chthonic powers felt like pain in your chest. And throughout the book, there were moments where she felt blinding pain in her chest, while people mysteriously started convulsing and dying. It turns out that Alexis's blood is what kills people, because in every instance of someone dying, it's been right after they came in contact with her blood. It also says something about how her power is so strong that she's actually capable of killing an immortal Spartan instead of just weakening them into a comatose state. And of course she can, because she's the most amazing specialist girl who's ever existed. Of course she's able to kill immortals with her special blood. Alexis is actually the daughter of Hades and Persephone, but when she was a baby, Titans attacked her house and someone from the house of Hermes grabbed her and teleported away, but then lost her and they all just thought that she was dead. Also, her name isn't Alexis, it's Hercules. For starters, who the hell names their daughter Hercules? Second, Hercules was Zeus's son, not Hades. So blood of Hercules directly refers to her blood because she's been Hercules all along. Also, I just want to point out that Hercules isn't actually Greek. The original Greek hero was Heracles. Hercules was the Roman translation of the name. This has nothing to do with the book, I'm just being nitpicky because this fake Greek fan who wrote a story inspired by Greek lore that isn't anything like Greek lore named her main character after the Roman version of said Greek hero. Anyway, this is stupid, and Jasmine once again has taken Greek lore and bastardized it so terribly she may as well have just made her own world and lore that has nothing to do with Greek mythology because nothing in this book is canon except for the names. So obviously the House of Zeus has fucked up majorly, and to try and cover all of this up, Zeus tries to offer an alliance through marriage, but Charon butts in to say that he and Alexis and Augustus are already engaged. Remember all the boxes with the body parts they gave her? Those apparently had customary proposal jewelry in them, but of course Alexis didn't see them because she was too disturbed by receiving a box with eyeballs and fingers. He and Augustus also gifted her a hoodie and a blanket, but never said it was from them. She just finds those things in her room, and because it's winter in the Crucible and she's freezing, of course she uses those things, but that's seen as an acceptance of their proposal, and she just didn't realize it because she knows nothing about Spartan culture. So she was manipulated into an engagement with these unhinged maniacs without her knowledge. And instead of being horrified by this, readers are supposed to find it cool and romantic and fun? Hello? What's even weirder is that Alexis has this whole internal monologue about how this guy played her this whole time and backed her into a corner, but when her parents turn to her and ask her if this is all true, instead of saying that this all happened without her knowledge and he's trying to manipulate her into marrying him, she says he's telling the truth. She is literally the full-blooded heiress of House Hades. She can easily turn this down by saying that she was tricked, and Charon would probably get punished for all of this, but instead everyone's like, oh, this is gonna be such a great honor. What? Also, this only just now occurred to me, but remember in the beginning how they changed the Spartan marriage laws to 26? Alexis isn't even 20 yet. Does that make her a child bride? If the legal minimum age is 26, how is it okay for her to be married? This is never addressed in the book. Essentially, Charon and Augustus plotted to skirt the new marriage law because it stated they weren't allowed to marry any of the listed Chthonic Spartans. But Alexis wasn't on that list, so they manipulated her into accepting their proposals to get out of marrying an Olympian and keeping their Chthonic bloodline strong. So we've got a little eugenics sprinkled in too. That's super awesome. And you know that this book is going to try and spin it in a way that they actually have real feelings for Alexis, but they don't. They don't know Alexis. Not once in this book have any of them had a single conversation where they learn anything about each other. They have no idea who she is, what she likes, what she dislikes, the life that she's lived up until now, and the only thing that she knows about them is that they're violent and aggressive and possessive and they terrify her. They have done nothing but torment her physically and mentally because, need I remind you, Augustus used his brain-melting powers on her that one time that she pissed him off. So there's literally no way they could have any feelings for her because they have had zero meaningful interactions to foster any kind of real emotional connection. Alexis does that teleport thing to look for Charlie and they have this emotional reunion, but then it's all ruined the next morning when Charon, Augustus, Patroclus, and Achilles tear down their cardboard box shelter and start pointing guns at Charlie. Where the fuck are you in a cardboard box? And who the fuck is this? Charon rasped. Actually, don't tell me. I'd rather shoot first and then find out. A safety was clicked off. Alexis freaks out and starts screaming at them that if they do anything to Charlie, she'll kill all of them and then herself, and she won't leave him behind again, and blah 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 blah. And Patroclus says this. For Cronus' sake, Patros shouted, interrupting my tirade. While Charon was tracking you here, Augustus told us you had a brother. We were always planning on bringing him back. We're not monsters. First off, how could Augustus have known that she had a brother? Alexis specifically kept Charlie a secret because she was worried about Spartans going after him. There was one moment where she accidentally let the name Charlie slip out, and that sent Augustus into a huge bitch baby fit because she was saying that another man felt like home, and he really didn't like that because he's an abusive, possessive shitbag. Secondly, yes, you are monsters, because Charon literally said that he'd rather kill Charlie now and then find out later. Charon's smile was all teeth. The real question is, why is our betrothed living in a fucking box? We will be addressing this later. For now, run away from us again and we'll chain you to our bed. Forever. Wow. So sexy. I love when my female protagonists are threatened with imprisonment by men who claim to care about them. We then suddenly jump to Alexis's wedding day, and I'm not gonna read this entire scene, just the incredibly concerning dialogue. Charon suddenly starts asking her at the altar if she's okay, and she says, no, I'm not, and his response is, you will be, and then Augustus cuts in. Augustus shifted closer. Pay attention. Don't do this now, he whispered, glaring at both of us, black eyes flashing. You would say that, I scoffed. What's that supposed to mean, Alexis? Or, Augustus whispered huskily against the shell of my ear, should I call you Hercules? How about you call me nothing, Professor? I'm only here because you tricked me. You're here because you accepted our gifts, he said harshly. I warned you that someone would step in with how reckless you were acting, and you agreed that we would be the ones to take care of you. Kronos fucking knows you need the help. You're delusional. I'd never choose you to. Not in a million years. You trapped me. That's not true, Alexis. It is. I'm positive, I snarled. Don't touch me. I stepped away. Augustus grabbed my bicep and yanked me back between them. But you belong to us, he said silkily. You've shown it. Acta non verba. Deeds, not words. In your dreams, I haven't shown you anything. Oh, Alexis, you don't want to know the wicked things I dream about. Don't test me, Augustus whispered ominously. Not here. Not now. you won't like the result. Cool. So we've got manipulation, threatening, and gaslighting tacked on, as if the sexual harassment and grooming on Augustus's end wasn't bad enough, because keep in mind, that's her teacher. The actual ceremony comes to an end, and they get to the "you may now kiss the bride" part, but then everyone starts leaving for this part, and I'm like, what kind of kissing are they about to do that requires privacy? But before that, though, we get a 2-page chapter from Patroclus' point of view, and he's super mad about this marriage because he wants Alexis, and he and Achilles have decided that they're going to find a way to steal her away from Augustus and Charon and make her theirs, because they have decided that she belongs to them and she just doesn't know it yet. Back to the kiss, Charon is essentially just edging her for an hour, but it was only a page long, so the pacing was really weird, and Augustus then uses his mind powers to make her finish by commanding her to feel ecstasy. This scene was just really weird to read in general, and also the positions were really weird, because at one point I think Augustus was supposed to be behind her while Charon was munching bush, but then he was in front of her because she was leaning forward with her chin on his shoulder, but Charon was still between her legs, resting his head on her thighs, so I was trying to figure out how they were all like squished together, and it wasn't very clear. Alexis then comes to the realization that Charon and Augustus have been stalking her basically throughout the entire book, and she freaks out and tries to get away from them, but they won't let her go, and she ends up passing out. You know, we love a man who refuses to take no for an answer. Alexis then wakes up hours later with her douchebag husband sleeping next to her and vows to make them pay for tricking her, which I find really weird that she agreed to this marriage in the first place, because she literally had the chance to tell everyone the truth, that she didn't know the significance, and they were using her ignorance to force her into this engagement. I'm fairly certain that Hades and Persephone, heads of their house who just found their daughter they thought was dead for the last 20 years, would have done anything to keep her from being forced to marry these psychopaths, but no, she said that they were telling the truth and let everyone believe that she was on board with this. And that's the end of the book. That's it. I am not, like, I tend to be pretty dramatic, but I'm not kidding when I say that this is one of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think that this might have been worse than Age of Scorpius. Don't get me wrong, that book was nigh unreadable, but I could still see Audra's vision, and there was, at the very least, still an attempt at a story. This book had next to no plot. It was just torture porn with a bully fetish. Another issue that I had with this book was that despite all of its dark themes, the actual writing was so unserious and juvenile. Alexis was constantly going on about her love for Carl Goss, and there were constant Tumblr brain rot-esque phrases used, like free the nips and the lips, and spoiler alert, and stuff like that. It literally wasn't until the last few chapters where it felt like the story tried to be serious, and Alexis stopped having those random rawr XD moments, and the tone actually aligned with the themes of this book. I have never struggled so much to get through a book. I specifically had to bribe myself to get through this book. Like, if I read a set amount of chapters, I'll be allowed to read something I actually like. I've never had to try and motivate myself to read a book until this one. And I'll be so real, I genuinely considered just not finishing it. But I really felt like I couldn't do a rant review on a book that I hadn't read all the way through. Normally at the end of my videos, I like to do a quick highlight of the things that I did and didn't like about the book, but I'm going to skip that for this video. First off being that I have zero desire to talk about this book any more than I already have. Normally, when I'm reading a bad book, I like to rant about it to my friend Ashton or my boyfriend Soren, but it was kind of the opposite with this book. I would get really irritated if Soren tried to bring this book up, like at all, because it was one of those things where I just did not want to think or talk about it in my downtime. Like, that's how much I hated this book. And the second reason being that there's just not a single positive thing I can think of to say about this book. There was not a single likable or relatable character in this story. The plot was flat and uninteresting. The writing was juvenile and cringy, and overall, Jasmine is also just incredibly bad at handling sensitive topics. I took mental damage trying to read this book. Like, I'm fairly certain that it killed off a lot of brain cells in the process. Instead of doing any of that, I'm actually going to take a quick moment to promote another book that I feel like meets some of these themes, but is actually well written. For anyone who is looking to read a dark fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic world that is based on actual, accurate Greek mythos, I highly recommend The Terrace Trials by Lucian Burr. This book actually really fucked me up, but it was also extremely well written, and the gore was insane. I also love when a story sprinkles in Catholic guilt, being a queer man who was raised Catholic myself. Terrace Trials was actually compelling, and the horror and violence in this book just kind of grips you by the throat. I remember coming out of my room after reading the Nemean lion scene to rant in gruesome detail to my boyfriend just how insane it was, and even he was super horrified by what I was telling him. It was a lot, and the ending really had me fucked up. But it was a well-written book, and I think that the horror was very good. Anyway, Blood of Hercules really took a lot out of me, so I've decided that my next deep dive is going to be on a book that I actually enjoy, because as great as it is tearing apart awful books, if all I do on this channel is force myself to read shitty stories that I hate, like this one, it eventually stops being fun for me, and I don't want reading to feel like some kind of chore. So the next couple of videos are most likely going to be more positive read experiences. That's it for this video. For those of you who have stuck around for the end of this dumpster fire, thank you so much. It really means a lot to me that my crash outs mean something to people. In the meantime, don't be like me reading this book, and make sure to actually take care of yourselves. I hope to see you all again for the next video, and as always, remember to keep it real.
I'm done.
You're done.
I'm done. Yay.
You're done.
I'm done. Ugh.